Jeff, can we start? Are we okay to go?
Yes.
Good. So, Victor, do you want to give it a go?
Let's kick this off. Everybody, thank you for joining us again today. Barcelona Metropolitan welcomes the fantastic Inspire people, the property experts of Barcelona. We have Raf Jacobs again sharing his wisdom with us.
Hello.
It is a huge help to have you. As everybody knows, we love to add value to the international community by talking to them about things that are relevant to your experience as an expat. And of course, buying a home or finding a home, negotiating a mortgage, all of these things are near and dear to our hearts. Anything that has to do with money is very important to us. And the fact that Raf has hundreds of clients under his belt in terms of trying to locate the right dream home and negotiating the price, as well as avoiding common errors, is a huge advantage to us today. So I want to thank you again, Raf, for helping us out. And of course, buenas vespras, buenas tardes, good evening to everybody. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Put them into the chat question. But we generally have a pretty active Q&A session. And if you need to, please, Barcelona Metropolitan is here to help you. Inspire. Raf, please take it away.
Thanks for the introduction, Victor. Welcome again, everyone, on this episode 9 of the real estate series. Episode 9, but on our blog, you find all the other episodes. You can watch them again. It's for free. You can just look at them. For those who don't know you, by means of introduction, so I live in Barcelona since 2001, from Belgium originally, and after a career in large management consulting firms like Accenture and similar firms, I created Inspire. Inspire, a company to help buyers on the Spanish property markets, international buyers, local buyers, both. But that's what we do. I also teach at the university in Barcelona. They followed us for more than a year, and they asked us, Raf, can you please explain to industry professionals in the real estate master what it means to accompany a buyer? Because in Spain, everyone is thinking of selling properties. There is thousands of agencies, registered agencies, unregistered agencies. Please tell. So that's what I do as well. The City Council of Barcelona, where I'm based, asked me as well to be their spokesperson for the international community for property-related matters. And you can find a lot of content, interviews, opinions, recommendations that I give to buyers in different media. You find them on our blog. You find the links below as well. Any questions you have, there's a chat function at the bottom of the screen. Please use that. Drop your questions. We'll discuss them at the end. But there's something very different in this webinar, something we've not done in previous webinars, because the previous webinars are all about different buyer relevant topics, meaning mortgages, the buying process, renovations, interest rates, buying cash or with a mortgage, things that can go wrong in a purchase process, how it does not work in Spain. That's the previous episodes. But a lot of people have contacted us and asked us, like, but what do you exactly do? How can you help us? So that's what this topic, what this webinar is going to be about, this episode is about. We have a very special guest with us today, and it's Dominica. Dominica was actually in one of our previous webinars with Metropolitan. She contacted me, I believe it was like the day after, with a 3-line email, like, Raf, great webinar. We have some very specific buying plans. Can we have a conversation? We talked the next day. In the meanwhile, Dominica and Darren have bought their property. They're renovating it now, doing some upgrades to it, and planning the moving in there. She's going to talk briefly about why they have decided, as a young international family, to have someone on their side who buys properties every day, why they thought that was going to be valuable. She's going to talk about some things that she might regret, that she would do different if she would go through the process again. And this is an opportunity for you as well to ask questions, not to me, you can also ask them to me, but also to Dominica, who has gone through the process. And she and Darren, they were, I think, 5 months ago or so, they were at a situation where many of you might be today. with plans to buy, but not having bought a property yet. Um, I think her situation might be very recognizable for many of you, um, might inspire you potentially. I remember when we asked Dominica and Darren at the notary when they had the keys in their hand, and we asked them, would you be okay to write a short Google review for us or a Facebook review or something like that with your experience? And said, yeah, we're very happy to do that. But actually, Dominica said, I would like to do something more. I think we can give more back to the community, to people that are interested in buying a property, and she wanted to share her experience. So I took that offer from her, and she's with us today. I want to say a big thank you because um, they're a young family. They have a baby, and I know the baby should go to bed around 8:30 or 6:30. Sorry, 6:30 every day. So during family peak and rush time, she's taking some time for all of you to share her story, her experience. So before we listen to her story, I'm going to give you a bit of context. I think that is relevant in terms of why we do what we do and where I think the value is for people that are thinking of buying. And then we talk about, or we listen to Dominica's story. I'm going to stop sharing the screen because we don't need that now. So you should see me larger now. I'll try and, so let me organize my, I'll try and place myself into the position of people like yourself, of people with buying plans. When you take a buying decision, or you plan to take one, it's a one-time, very big decision. For most people, financially, one of the biggest decisions in their life. But it's a one-time decision with lifetime consequences. What do I mean by that? If you buy a property to live in, it needs to become your home. The property becomes a house, a home. You need to be happy there. You want to have peace of mind, no problems with the property, with the neighbors, with, you don't want to have financial problems or concerns related to surprises, debt that pops up, unpaid invoices. Um, you need to be certain about the location. You can't change location once you bought a property, right? You can change the kitchen, but not location. So you got to take informed decisions before you make such a big uh, decision. Um, good properties sell quickly in Spain. Certainly good properties that fall within the segment where international buyers are looking at. So that's typically slightly different properties from what local people would be buying. So people have naturally, and if you are in the property buying mindset, you will have doubts, you will have uncertainties, which might paralyze you sometimes, which might give you feelings of frustration during the search or during dealing with the banks, because it is high demanding in terms of energy and patience when we go through such a process. But that's why we are there. Our role at Inspire is to make sure that you are protected as a buyer. We don't sell properties as every single agency on every corner of the city or the village does. Um, we help you buy properties. We defend your interest. What does that mean? We are independent. We can look after the best for you, meaning it needs to be the right decision for you. You, right decision means you don't make mistakes. It's the best property. We believe in the property as buyers, as buyer advisors. You you don't pay too much. You buy at the lowest possible price. You pay less than what other buyers will be paying in the market. We can de-risk every single step in the process. So avoid the surprises, give you that peace of mind, but also um, be there as an advisor, as a contact person throughout the entire journey to answer your questions, to answer. There's a lot of doubt that will pop up during such a process. Dominica will have some examples, I think. Um, it's like a seatbelt. It's like certainty, because based on a legal due diligence, a lot of people still doubt about a property. They need confirmation. They need someone else than the seller to say that it's a good property. That's very important. Or they need someone else than the bank to say that it's a good mortgage, etc. We see different types of buyers, people that have seen a property already and come to us and say, can you help me buy it? That's the case of Dominica and Darren. We see people that come to us and say, I'm searching, I would like support during my search. And other people come and say, And I think that's an interesting case where we can add most value from our end is I'm planning to buy, and from early on, can you help me think about everything that's important to buy a property? There's people who buy for primary residences, second residences, investment properties. Uh, we have customers that look at properties around €100,000, pure investments, very average properties in very average areas. We got people that buy a million plus properties. That's so it's certainly not a service that we provide for luxury investments or so. Absolutely not. We have a lot of people today that buy properties in the range of, let's say, between 150 and 700,000, 800,000 euros. There's a lot of there's a big majority of the customers are in that range. Many people tell us, like, when I search, it's time consuming. I've got a busy job. Everyone has a busy job today. And if you don't have a busy job, maybe you can't buy a property. Right? So people who can buy a property are typically busy people at work as well. Have a family as well to manage in parallel. Well, I don't have time. That makes it difficult then, because you need to search, you need to make appointments, follow up with the agencies, get information. But if you don't have time, we do have time. We've built that capacity on purpose. We can act quickly when a good property pops up. We can be there an hour later or a few hours later to visit it. But we also save you easily, I think, 90% of your time in the search, in the visits, throughout the process, different activities. Um, People tell us as well they worry to overpay. And that happens a lot with international buyers, that the seller, they take advantage of the fact that you don't have the right reference points. You don't know exactly, is 470 a good price for a property, or would 455 or 440 be better? How do you judge that, right? So but as overpricing, overpaying is impossible, because we know the benchmarks. We know we've hit so many properties. We know what is good. We know when to walk away from a property. So that's elements that they're addressing a lot of the concerns from our customers. Um, we also have access to off-market properties that are not listed on Idealista or similar websites. I talk about more about that later in the webinar after the Dominica story. Remind me about it, please. But when and I can share one. I think we asked a lot of our customers, or before they were customers, what their concerns were, and if you can read this, but main concern is this the right price for my property? And then the other concern, but still there are very high percentages, right, of people worry to make mistakes, worry to have a property with problems, or they say there's so many agencies. There seem to be more agencies than properties in some areas. So certainly if you go to the coasts, for instance. So which is a good agency? The financial part, the mortgages, or the language barriers. So a lot of worries. That's we are there to deal with all these things that you might that might lead you to not taking decisions, might lead you to missing opportunities, to take late decisions, to overpaying, to take regrettable decisions. That's our job, to protect you there um, and support you with that. From my point of view, we, people when you advise buyers, it can't be a one-man show. You can't be an expert in every, so many elements involved, so many things involved during a purchase process. I believe in specialists. That's why we've built a team. We've surrounded ourselves with the best people in their areas, meaning financials, negotiation, mortgages, for instance, optimizing mortgages, or negotiations, or finding off-market properties, having the network there to access those properties legally, identifying potential problems, get drafting first-class contracts, administrative support for the notary, etc., etc. So everyone in our team has a big passion for what they do in their area, and because in our job, and certainly in my opinion, for a buying decision, being good is not sufficient. Because I know that when you're just good, things might still go wrong. And you can't afford that things go wrong when you make the biggest financial decision in your life. It's the same with if you go to a doctor And if someone says, no, that's a good doctor, would you go to that doctor, or would you prefer a specialist doctor for something? Right. So good is not always enough, and the same is true for buyer agents, for people like ourselves. I guess that's why our customers recommend us. And unfortunately, Spain is not like the US or the UK or Germany or the Netherlands or other parts in Europe or other countries. Spain is not regulated. You can sell a house without an habitability certificate. You can sell a house that's affected by urban plans. You can sell a house where there's a debt involved. You can sell a house with an inheritance that's not yet accepted. So all these things are possible, and there's no liability from the seller. Again, that's where we got to protect it. So good advice is not a luxury. In our sector, I think there's no alternative for excellent work. You can't do a quick due diligence. You can't do half a technical inspection. You can't stop negotiating when the seller says, I think that's what I can do. No, you've got to go an extra mile. So let's listen to the story of Dominica. You can raise some questions then during the chat. Or we not too many on the call, so potentially you can open up your microphone after, but let's listen to the story first. And then I will go into more detail afterwards on what exactly we do in a structured manner from A to Z, and how it all works.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we do, Dominica, we do.
Perfect. Sorry, I forgot my my earphones, so.
We hear you well. So.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, thank you for inviting me to this webinar, Raf. I'm happy to share our experience with Inspire. I just want to throw out the disclaimer out there. I have an 8-month-old, as you said, so in case I don't make much sense or I mumble, that's because I have not slept in the past 8 months, okay? So yes, as you mentioned, I attended one of your webinars back in October, beginning of October, and I think it was the one on step-by-step guide how to buy a property in Spain. I highly recommend that one to anyone that's looking. And yeah, shortly after, I reached out actually right away to you to schedule the initial consult as we had found the property. And yeah, shortly after we hired Inspire Apartments to help us through the process. So just a background story. My husband is Canadian, and we moved to Barcelona, Spain in July last year. And we started immediately looking for a place in Poblano area, which we loved. And we found our dream apartment, our dream flat in October. And we saw it, and we immediately put an offer on it the same day. And we also decided to go ahead with the reservation. At that point, we weren't sure if we should hire someone. Is it needed? Is it not needed? But then we actually started receiving a lot of different documents from the seller, from the selling agency, that were about the flat and the building. So we received 6+ documents that were the certificates of the building, and everything was legal Spanish, which you cannot just pop into Google Translate and hope for the best, right? You need actual experts to look at that. And if we actually asked the sellers about the documents or the state of the flat, we weren't, or the agency, we weren't sure they would have our interest at heart, because the agency was representing the sellers, and their main goal was to sell the flat no matter what, right? So so we weren't sure if we could trust them. That was also a deciding factor why we decided to hire Inspire Apartments. And so from then on, we got help with all of those documents. You guys, I believe you sent an architect to have a look at the building itself, structurally, walls, staircase. even the rooftop, I believe, things that we would never think of even. And also to review with all those documents to make sure that what's on paper we're actually buying in real life, to make sure it's aligned. Yeah, that was a big help. Another big puzzle that we needed big help with was the mortgage. Coming from Canada, we thought, oh, it's just easy peasy process, 2 weeks done. But we realized it's much more complicated. And even if you go to a bank, one bank, 2 different branches, you'll get completely different information regarding the mortgage interest rates or mortgage rates or conditions of the mortgage. So Inspire reached out also to different banks and broker companies. So we have different options for mortgages, and you guys made sure we get the best possible rate we can. Once we selected the bank, you helped us through the we had multiple conversations, 3-way conversations. It was us, Inspire, and bank, where we discussed the conditions of the mortgage, and renegotiated the interest rate, renegotiated, yeah, in the end, it was nice to have someone look through 20+ pages of mortgage agreement, just send it to you, and you guys have a lawyer in your team that can look through the mortgage agreements to make sure there are no surprises down the line. And that was really nice to have. It really made us feel comfortable in buying a property here in Barcelona. Another thing that was nice was the ARAS document that was drafted by Inspire Apartments, so by the buying party, by us, not by the sellers. So there were no hidden secrets that we would be signing. So that was really good. So Inspire basically led us all the way till the end. I like the quick replies, the weekly updates. You send us next steps, what needs to be done in order to move this thing forward, to make sure that we are on time with the ARAS deadline. And yeah, I would recommend Inspire properties to anybody that's looking to buy a place in Barcelona or in Spain. And the only regret we do have is that we did not engage Inspire before we negotiated that price, or before we signed the reservation. I'm sure you guys would have done a much better job at that than us, because you know the market, you know the prices, you know all the different things that can be negotiated that we didn't even think of. So that's my one regret. But if you guys have any questions for me, please feel free to, I guess, put them in chat, and back to
or open the microphone and ask the question directly.
Exactly.
Maybe ask. Just a point out. Thank you, Dominika, for sharing this. Thank you very much. The case of Dominika and Darren was regarding the mortgage. The bank basically told them, "Don't worry, there is a pre-approval for your mortgage." And then when I started talking to the bank, we saw that actually we should worry because some things were not okay. And then that approval was actually not an approval. That was someone who said, like, yeah, we can finance you.
Person,
yeah, right. So someone from the back office, but not someone from the risk department. And therefore, that had a massive impact on the timings, because we had to postpone or prolong the reservation contract.
We risk losing the place basically,
Right.
because we had to extend multiple times the reservation. Yeah.
And also with these contracts, normally agencies try to, or sellers try to use their contracts, and that's because then they're not liable. Then there is no protection in there for the buyer. Because think about it, when you buy without Inspire or a buyer agent, know that the seller does have a representative. The seller has the agency, right? And the agency has their lawyers. So keep that in mind when you do that. And great. So for people on the call, because this is a webinar for you, write your questions. I know, feel free to ask questions directly. Who wants to go? No questions. Can't believe it.
I'll give it a shot.
There's one.
What would you say is perhaps the most common error from people who, they're smart investors in other countries, but they come to Spain and it is different from what they were accustomed to?
Well, I think if we apply it to the case that Dominica explained, there is, I think, a lot of things that were different, and we have two very smart buyers in front of us, but the process is different, and the way it works is different from Canada, for instance, right? The way of getting mortgages is different, but also I think the reference points in terms of what is a good value for this property, how much is it actually worth. I remember early discussions with Dominica and Darren, where, because they already committed, they already signed the reservation contract, which is fine, but then we also thought, like, well, we think we could get this property for a bit less probably. And we talked about, shall we try and exit the reservation and renegotiate and see, but in the end, we without sharing the details here, but that is things I think you got to be, that's hard for people to decide on, and we see this every day, right? When because you're excited about a property, there's an emotional component of the decision making. There is some pressure because you need to take a quick decision because there's only one property, of course. You don't have new developments in Barcelona where you have 30 identical units. You don't have them. You find them on the coasts when there's large projects. So if you like a property, taking that decision quickly with the right information and making sure it's an optimized decision, I think that's the most difficult thing for a lot of people.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add that we also kind of wanted that stamp of approval that we're not paying crazy money for this apartment that we fell in love with. And Anna on your team actually did the research. There is a lot of different components that actually create the price of the property, not just the property itself, but the location, proximity to all the amenities, banks, grocery stores, schools, beach, stuff like that. So we eventually we kind of got that stamp of approval from Anna, but also from the bank that they send their own person that evaluated the flat, and it was slightly higher. So we were happy eventually, but I do agree you would have done a much better job at negotiating, and there was some wiggle room, I would say. Next time, next our second property off.
Sure. I think logically we can add most value the earlier we are involved in the process, and it's not necessarily a lot more work we need to do, but there's just a lot of benefits in. So for instance, when you're researching your property, you're screening the market and you're making appointments and so on, we can coach you during that stage. We can give you our tips, our checklists, our things to watch out for when you visit properties, or we could even search for you and even look at off-market properties, etc. But that is very valuable. You come across as a more prepared buyer. We see customers that we coach during the search, they and there's people, I said, I've been searching for 8 months, maybe not always that intensively, but for a long time. I'm tired of searching. I don't find what I'm looking for. We start with a workshop. We align expectations, set realistic expectations. We validate feasibility of the with their budget, what locations come into play for certain property features and a certain lifestyle. We validate it, and then after a question of weeks or maybe a month or 2 months, they have the property, and the buying process really starts. And I think that's so. The earlier we're in there, the more value we can add, of course.
Ralph, we have a couple of questions on financing and getting a mortgage.
All right, I see a question here. Did the bank finance your 10 or 50% closing costs, or did you have to pay that upfront in addition to your down payment? I can give a general answer to this, or if you want to respond, Dominica, to your case, if you know the details about that, feel free to respond. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, what was the question?
So the question was, did your bank finance your 10 to 15% closing costs or buying costs? I think it refers to the purchase tax and so
no,
on. Or
we financed the 10%.
Right. Yeah. So there is have a look at,
and that's also mainly because I think we moved just from Canada in July and we were looking in October. I believe they would appreciate us to have a longer credit history in Spain. But I'm not sure, Raf, what's your take on this?
So we see there are banks that do finance the purchase costs, which is typically 10% purchase tax and €2,000 for the notary and land registry and so on. Some banks do finance that. Not many banks do it. Some other banks finance 60, 70, 80, some 90%. If you have other properties, they might even finance 100%. So it's very individual, and that's why we need to start not start talking to banks when you find a property, but before you look at properties, talk to the banks to know what is possible financially speaking, with a certain number of savings. Up to what property purchase price can you buy maximum, so you know where to put a cutoff point, to know what that would mean in terms of monthly payback, so financial cost every month, and then look at different options. What if you were to put a bit more or a bit less of own funds into a transaction? How does that change your? And then different banks will have different options. Some will say, well, you buy as an investment, so therefore you only finance 60% of your purchase price. So you need to put 40% plus the buying costs in. And other banks say, well, if you buy a place to live yourself, we can do 80% plus the buying cost. You get to 90% plus financing. The episode on webinars is 1 hour on mortgages is 1 hour about this type of topic. So Sherry, feel free to watch it. That's on our blog. Another question: can you recommend a mortgage broker that doesn't charge steep upfront fees to assess the likelihood whether banks will grant a mortgage? We don't want to pay a high fee only to be. Yeah, yes, there is several, but again, before reaching, I'm the one who reaches out to banks or who recommends you what simulations, what type of scenarios to request from the banks. Before doing that, I set up a meeting with you. I need to understand your situation better. And then based on that, see which banks I think you're a good fit for, a good potential fit for, given your financials, given your personal situation, work situation, given your goals, and then reach out to those banks with questions. Banks and brokers, because there is brokers that do charge a fee, an upfront fee. There's brokers that charge only success-based at the end. There's brokers that don't charge you at all. They're paid by the bank. So it's good to work with a mix of banks and brokers in many situations, because you can get a good picture of what is possible financially speaking. Okay, so see Jeff posted the link here to the blog where you can access the webinars on on mortgages. So the person who asked the question, drop us an email if you want to at raf@inspireapartments.com, and we can set up a conversation. The first consultation is always for free. I take 20, maximum 30 minutes of my time for you. I listen to your situation, your plans, your financials. Maybe you have a property that you've seen, you send me the link, we talk about it. You get my opinion, my view. And I can explain you then how we could support you, what we would recommend in terms of next steps and things to do. There's another question here. What are the options for refinancing apartments after you bought them with your own money? So buy with equity, remodel, and refinance. Depends where you are and what type of projects, and if it's one or multiple apartments, but it's very difficult in general, Youssef. It's not an easy thing to do. The banks are, if you have the money, fairly eager to finance the purchase. Sometimes, but often not, the renovation. But if you have that flexible mortgage terms, allow you to pay back the mortgage once you sell the property, for instance, if that were your plan, then you can do that with attractive financial conditions, etc. It depends as well if you do this type for one property as an individual, or if you do this under a company structure, in which case financing becomes a totally different topic. It might be easier or more complex depending on the situation. Same here. We can discuss offline. But when you buy as an investment, you make your business case when you buy the property on the purchase price. Of course, assuming it's the best property at a good location with future potential on the selling and rental market, to remove the risks, but or to control the risks. But and at that stage, if you finance such a transaction, you can get ROIs which become, there's a multiplier then because of the mortgage, because you buy, invest with partially with money from the bank, and that makes your ROI go up to typically above 10% if you do it properly, and that's very, very attractive for a lot of investors, of course. Again, depends on what topics. Is there any more questions for Dominica, who shared her story? Because otherwise she will leave and put her baby to bed. So please be vocal if you have any more questions for her. All right. No? Okay, then Dominica, thank you very much for being with us, for sharing your experience. And if people have more questions, you can always ask them to me, and I can respond later. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Okay, so that's that part. Another question here: what should a buyer try to avoid doing on their own? Well, obviously, I'm a big advocate of having the support throughout the entire buying journey, because that's when you're sure that everything is optimized. Because you can, for instance, imagine you see a property and you like it, you negotiate the price with the seller, with your agency, you agree on a price, and then you have a lawyer who looks at the contract and optimizes the contract, and you go and buy it. So then you have a good contract, maybe a perfect contract, but you might still buy a bad property. You might still buy the wrong property with a good contract. You might still pay too much. You might still buy in a street that we wouldn't recommend because we know how the street is after midnight. Or you might still buy in a community, in a building, where there is problems, discussions, maybe law cases going on between the neighbors. These things happen. So I think it depends on how comfortable you feel. We see people that say, I don't mind searching. And I think that's maybe the easy part. If you are local, you don't mind searching and stuff, you have the time to search, you speak sufficient Spanish to talk to agencies so they don't abuse the fact you're a foreign buyer. You can act quickly to go and visit properties, then I think the model where you search and we would just coach you, so you're in the driver's seat, we're in the passenger seat, can work very well. Um, but things like negotiations, it's something we negotiate harder than anyone else. We've even been asked by industry associations to train their people on negotiations. So um, from that point of view, that's also one element that makes our service like paying for itself, because the fact you bring the price down to a point lower than what our customers would achieve on their own, that's a very big incentive. I would never do alone or avoid doing on your own the legal work. Never try and be a technical expert if you're not on a property. There is technical elements that you might not see, structural elements in the building, in the apartment, maybe some cracks in the wall. Maybe they're not important, maybe they're very important, maybe they're showstoppers. So that's if all the coordination, it's and I can maybe talk now a bit more about the different steps we go through it with our buyers. So you see as in the process, as a journey, how it looks like, and then you can decide for yourself if you see value in those parts, in these different steps. Yes or no. We do have customers that are lawyers. We do have customers that are architects. We do have customers that have bought several properties already and want to buy the second or third property, for instance. Because people realize that when you go once through a buying process, that's one thing, you learn a lot. But when you do this every day, there's a lot more experience, a lot more expertise that you can benefit from and optimize it all. Okay. So how do we, as defenders of your interests as buyers, what do we do? The first thing is, for those people that would reach out to us after this session, I've done this after previous sessions, we set up a first conversation. I need to understand your situation, as we discussed before, and first of all see if this is feasible, because a lot of people are searching for something that doesn't exist. So wrong combination or an impossible combination between property features, how big, how nice, how beautiful, how much light, how many bedrooms, locations, different areas in the city or on the coast, budget, your money plus the financing, and your lifestyle. I like to have the bakery next door, little bars, terraces, or I want parks, etc. So this first step one. Then second step, and that's what we discussed briefly before, the financials. A meeting with you to speak only about your income, who do you work for, your savings. We talk about fixed versus variable interest rates, the duration, how old are you, with what monthly payback do you feel comfortable when you would take on a mortgage. If you're renting, a lot of people say, well, I rent and I pay 900 rent per month. So I would prefer my mortgage payback to be somewhere similar to what I'm paying as rent now, because then I don't have to adjust my lifestyle, etc. Or other people say, no, I can afford more. That's all financial parameters. And then I make recommendations to you. That's the part I do personally. What do we need to request banks? What information, what scenarios, options do we need to request them? Because if we just ask them, can I get a mortgage? You get a yes, don't worry answer. And that's what happened with Dominica and Darren. The bank said, yes, don't worry. And then when they reserved the property, I figured out that actually there was no commitment from the bank, and we had to do very, very difficult things to get to the final approval, even postpone the transaction. That's the first part. Once we get responses from banks, which from some banks we get responses, I get them in 1-2 days. Some banks need a bit more. Some brokers need maybe 2 weeks because there's additional steps in their process. Banks. Then we set up a workshop, and the workshop is really there to build these realistic expectations, aligned expectations for your project, whether it's an investment, whether it's a second residence that you're dreaming of, or it's going to be your home. We need to be realistic from start, including the feedback from the banks. This week I spoke with a German buyer, and so we had an idea of what purchase price was possible. Well, the bank came back, and one bank said the purchase price is not going to be 400, but 300,000 euros, the maximum purchase price. Another bank said something similar, but another bank said, yeah, we can go up to 400, maybe even a little bit more. So that's the information we need before looking at properties. Okay, and then the search starts, and then you can search yourself. We coach you, tips, checklist, coaching. You see a good property, we discuss the property with you, we go and visit it with you. If we believe it's great and we don't see any red flags and you like it, and we believe the price point is good, or we think it's negotiable, then we move on with it. Or in that search, we can do that. And then we can look at, then we include off-market properties. And what are off-market properties? It's something, it's the hidden gems of the property market. It's the pearls, it's properties that are not publicly available, and it's things that everybody wants. How do we find them? Well, because we've built very consciously during years and years our network in the industry, as experts, as reputed, as company and people with a high reputation in this sector, with qualified buyers, and the sector knows that. And for instance, an inheritance. Who is the first one that knows about inheritance or a divorce? It's not the real estate agent, right? It's the lawyer, maybe the notary, maybe it's the company managing the building of the different owners. Maybe it's someone from the family who has contacts with us. Maybe it's a family office, etc. So that are properties that are we very often, I think typically the first or second one to visit them before there are pictures of the property, before there's a description of the property, before they're published anywhere. And we buy a lot of them. We can't guarantee how many of these properties will pop up, but we get them in a tailored manner. So based on customer, based on buyer demand, we speak to our network and say, we're looking for a 2-bedroom Attico with a terrace in Barcelona within that budget, and more criteria. And then we visit them first. And if they're good, you need to come with us the same day, the same afternoon, because such properties, if we think they're good, they will sell quickly. And I'll show my screen. I will give you an example, what they look like. But it can be really everything, very diverse. It is based on, so if you say, I want a cheap investment property of 150K, yes, we can find them off market. If you want something luxury, high end, the same is possible, right? For instance, I think you should see my screen again now. This is an example. This is not listed anywhere, and this is a type of property very high in, this is Barcelona, very high in demand. Why? Big terrace, very central location in Borne, very desirable part of Barcelona. Nice street, beautiful historic building, right? A little old palace, fully renovated, 2 bedrooms, big terrace. That's a property I spoke, and these pictures, they can't be more hotter. They can't be hotter. This is from this morning. I spoke to the American owners. They knew us. They were in touch with us and said, like, we are interested in getting this property, in selling this property. What do you think about it? So this is something that's there. What is the price rate for this? Close to 550, to give you an idea. But then you get something ready to move in. No future cost foreseen. Other examples. Cheaper investment properties to rent out, or maybe something to live. This is an example under 200,000 euros in Raval. But it's hard to see because there is no good picture set of this property, right? We didn't send yet a photographer in, or the owner didn't send yet a photographer in. This is a little terrace. So in Raval, a property with a terrace is hard to find. Uh, it's renovated, it's ready to rent out. So that's again in the lower price range, very good for investors. Again, this is, as a buyer, this is non-competitive because there is no other buyers who can see this. That's the benefit of such properties. High-end properties, prime location, Rambla Catalunya. We know this is coming up for sale. This is 1 million plus. But it's a beautiful Art Nouveau apartment, a beautiful door, beautiful tiles. There is even wooden floors with designs in the wooden floor. So you find that these type of properties very desirable by buyers. And again, when we screen the market, we come across these properties, and very often from a price point of view, they're more attractive than comparable other properties because either they want to sell quickly or there is no agent involved, etc. Another example here, we found this off market recently for one of our customers who bought it last month. Attico with a terrace. How you this in Barcelona is very difficult to find. 366,000 euros, unbelievable. So these things exist. We talked about back to my flow, back to the process. So the search, you're the driving seat, or we're in the driving seat, and you're in the passenger seat. You save 90% easily of the time searching and the visits. You only see the best properties that we present, and we help you take decisions. So the seller will always say it's a great property, it's okay, everything has been paid by the owner, and don't worry. We always do it like this. If you ask a question, right, then you should start worrying if they say this. Then you start worrying. We give you our opinion, our view on the pros and cons of that property to help you take a decision. What do we think? What would I say to my sister if she would like to buy that property? That's the information you get from our team, from Kim and Anna, who are the two ladies experts in this segment. When you like a property and we believe it's a good deal, Anna comes into play, and she builds the relationship with the sellers, with the agency, with the owner, or with the lawyers of the sellers, and she will negotiate. She'll run a formal appraisal of the property. How much is this really worth based on hard data, based on what other people have been paying in the same building, in the same area, in the same street, etc. We use big data tools for it, but also based on our feeling with the market. What is happening today in the market? And for instance, and I talked about it in the previous webinar, the timing is fantastic to buy. The market is offering big opportunities for buyers, but this is temporary. As soon as the travel restrictions will be lifted, as soon as the vaccines will prove to be more effective, there will be again a strong increase in demand for the properties that typically international buyers are looking at. It increased demand with a stable supply means that prices will start to go up again. Okay, there is some stock in the market to be absorbed first by buyers, but again, the good properties, there is no stock. So prices will react very quickly. We already see prices of Atticos increasing because people value outside space. Once we got a deal in negotiation locked in, we draft the contracts. We formalize the offer for you. This needs to be done professionally. It's not enough to just send an email, that's our offer. You need to talk about different terms and conditions, not just the purchase price. You need to have exit options in case you figure out something that's not okay. Because when you make an offer, you won't have all information about the property. Forget it. It's impossible in Spain. So there's no transparency. There's no single database for properties like you have in other parts of the world. So we need to make a conditional offer. Next step then is the full due diligence. The lawyer comes into play and the architect comes into play. Technical check. Is the property okay? Any red lights, any things you should know, future maintenance, expected costs, etc. An estimate on the renovation cost, because we renovate a lot of properties, so we can very easily in the same visit tell you, we believe this renovation is going to be between 65 and 75,000 euros, or between 15 and 22,000 euros, right? You need to know that before we negotiate, before you take your decision. The same is with the legal feedback from the lawyers. Look at the webinar about the buying process. We talk about everything that can go wrong in the process, how it things you should avoid, mistakes that happen way too often and can be avoided. So that's the due diligence part, resulting in a purchase commitment contract, earnest money, arras contract in Spanish, which is when you really commit. We help you draft that, as Dominica mentioned accurately. The seller, the agency, will always try to send you their version of the contract and say that that is a standard version and that's what I always use. If they say they use it always, again, start worrying, because it's not what you should be using it. Remember, they defend the interest of the seller, of the owner, not your interest. So we look at that. The contract easily becomes 1.5 to 2 times as long as it's initially, or as what the sellers would like to use. We get the clauses in we believe we need to have in to protect our buyers, and that's about anticipating things that can happen. You know, if everything goes as expected, you don't need a contract, right? A contract is there, and you need it in case something does not go as expected. Right? What if you figure out there is unpaid bills by the owner after you've purchased? What if the owner dies because of COVID between you committing and going to a notary, right? What if the owner divorces in the meanwhile? What if there is damage on the property in the meanwhile? What if afterwards something happened? What if some things needed a repair before you go to a notary, etc.? So needs to be anticipated. And then once you've committed and the selling party has committed as well, you sign the respective contract. Then we need to tie everything together, because then the next step is closing at the notary, and then is a massive administrative. Then it's welcome to the Spanish bureaucracy, where you need to have everyone aligned. And if you're alone, it's going to become very, very, very difficult. We need to align you, your bank, if there's a mortgage, or even without a mortgage, your bank, our team, our lawyer, the seller, the agency, potentially the lawyer of the seller, the bank of the seller, the notary, the lawyers of the notary, the city administration, the land registry, etc. And there's more parties involved. All right. That needs to be coordinated properly. We need to, for instance, we're going with 2 buyers to the notary on Friday for signing their respective purchases. So what are we doing now? Calculating the exact amounts that will be paid by bank check or by bank transfer, in one case, to the seller. And it's not the remaining amount of the purchase price. If paid 10%, we're not going to pay the remaining 90%. It will be 90% minus a few costs we will withhold from the purchase price until the seller can prove that these costs are covered. Obligations that the seller has. Because if you pay the money to the seller, it can be very hard to recover it later. They will just disappear, or they might just disappear. So that's what we're doing now. We're reading the draft of the purchase deed in advance. We're preparing it with the notary, discussing with the sellers as well, so that everybody's comfortable with it. We go with you as a buyer to the notary. We translate real time into English or other language if you want to, there, so that you know exactly what you're signing, that there is no stress. You can't believe how important it is for people when you sit at a notary and you need to sign such a big document. You know it should be ready, but if you're alone there, it's very stressful. And if something is not okay, you can't figure out. And then we advise you on what you should do once you're an owner, your obligations, practical things like utility contracts, how do you change that, fiscal obligations with the tax authorities, and so on, so that you know exactly what to do and that there's no surprises there. I went quickly through the process of how we support you. But again, it's about making sure it's the best decision for you. We believe in the property. You don't pay too much to the lowest possible price, and all risks removed, no risks throughout the entire process in any single step. And 4, making sure it's a pleasant journey. It's a journey where you have responses to the doubts that arise, responses to questions that will pop up, because that is something that people value a lot. They tell us, based on just having a property with a good price, etc., people don't take easily a decision. They need more reassurance. Obviously, the risks need to be removed. Obviously, you need to have a good price, and technically needs to be okay. But it's not just, people don't decide just based on that. We see you need confidence, expert recommendations, and have these answers when you have questions, right? And not answers coming from the seller, not answers coming from the lawyer of the seller. I'm going to go back to the questions here. Is it interesting to invest remotely apartments rental in Spain? I live in the Netherlands myself. A lot of people do this. Spain is a very attractive rental market since many years, and that's because there is you can make this is food for an entire workshop on investment strategy, because it depends what type of investment you want to make. An apartment on the coast for tourist rentals with high seasonability, or something central target to expat renters, something central target to the local tenants who rent for 5 years in Spain, who pay a maybe a bit less, but you have less worries. So there's a lot of things to take into account. Do you want to use it yourself potentially in the future, or maybe for your kids? Another parameter to take into account. There's a lot of topics for such a workshop. But yes, it is interesting. Because there is a temporary dip in property prices. So it's not going to be, in my opinion, like in the previous crisis, 2008, when prices dropped from 2008 to 2013, and then went up slowly. I think now the timing is a lot more compressed. So that's an interesting opportunity window for investors. Depends on if you want to invest to rent out long term, or maybe to sell in the next few years. You got to be careful with location. Location is very important for investments. I am a big believer of investing in cities, not on the coast, because you have a lot more stability in your demand, and so it means higher or less risk on not having tenants. You have a lot more demand as well on the selling market if for whatever reason you want to sell it again, and you need to do that in cities that have international demand, that have big companies, because that is what you need to drive a property market upwards in the long term. Without that, it's difficult. How long of a financial track record do you have to get a mortgage? We were freelancers up until almost a year ago, but one of us has been in a position has been a fixed contract since then. We earn in US dollars. Very good question. Very common situation among buyers. The answer is it depends. Banks look at it differently. Some banks won't finance you because your income is in US dollars. They assume that is more risk. But that's only a few banks that don't do that. Other banks, they don't make too much of a problem if you are an autonomo, as they call, a freelancer, as long as there is a proof of income, of stable income. If your income goes like this, then it's going to be difficult. It depends as well which industry you work in. If you work for in a tourist industry as a freelance, it's going to be very difficult to get a mortgage today. If you work for a company, if you work as a freelancer, but for a large, for instance, a customer, he works for 2 large companies in Japan, and because of the setup, he works as a freelancer. He has a very good salary, and that's okay for the banks. They're not worried because it's stable, recurring income, and his customer also, or his customers, they commit to long-term contracts. It's not like month by month. So yeah, you can. The bank will typically ask for your last year tax declaration, and if that is in Spain or in the US or elsewhere, that will impact the percentage of financing that is possible. Again, feel free to send me an email at raf@inspireapartments.com, and we can look at your situation specifically. See another question. You're interested in long-term Valencia rental for local students or expats? Yeah, Valencia is a interesting city for investments. Has dropped a lot historically in terms of prices. Has gone up significantly as well in the last few years. Up to last year, more or less, 2019, 2020, went up significantly because of strong demand, local demand, people from Madrid, for instance, buying there, people from Barcelona buying there, international people buying there that live there or don't live there, so buying in the center. The center is very diverse, and there is not that many good parts in the center. You got to be careful where you buy. So we've got good experience in Valencia, good insights, which areas are good. But again, the center isn't cheap anymore. So the location strategy becomes very important, and the strategy in terms of who is your target audience. Your description is too wide now. You say rentals for local students or expats. That's okay. That's a good investment initial idea. We've got to discuss these options, the pros and cons of them, and then see which is more suitable for your situation, for your risk profile, for your investment horizon, etc. Yeah, we're gonna in the meanwhile run a quick poll, just asking before we end how you're getting your feedback on the webinar. We do this in every webinar at the end. How inspiring did you find it? And I guess we put a lot of time in preparing these webinars, and we do them for free. So if you would just rate us, how much you liked it. I'll continue with the question in the meanwhile. There's a question here. I'm an attorney whose business is in the US. I own it. It's a good income, but will this be a problem? I have been in business for many years. No, shouldn't be a problem, Sherry. There is no reason why that would be a problem. We have a lot of US customers. They're a very active buying group. We've even US customers now who, well, and other countries, but a lot from the US, people that see the opportunity of the window of opportunity temporarily to buy now. We're showing them properties virtually through video meetings. When we are at the property, we show them the property. So we show them what we want to show them, not what the seller wants to show them. We organize a lot of powers of attorney now for buyers that allow them to do different things: open a bank account, sign the mortgage documents, sign the purchase, and represent them in things related to the purchase. So that is things we do a lot. The situation. So I'm not sure from your question if you ask it related to a mortgage. Is that a problem for a mortgage? Yes or no? It should not be initially. It might be even a benefit, maybe, depending on situation. And to buy, it's certainly not an issue at all. Okay. Another question: is Alea a good area to? Back to the question, just for the mortgage, Cherry says. So again, let's talk to different banks. Let's have a call where you explain your profile a bit better to me. Then we can test it with different banks, and because they will have different proposals and different options for you, less or more attractive depending on the bank. But we have customers like yourself. They have got mortgages. Shouldn't be a showstopper. Okay. Is Alea a good area to consider? Depends what for, but it's an area with significant demand because the connection to Barcelona is very good. You're close to the sea. So you can commute if you want to commute to the center, although people work more remotely. If you work remotely, you are close to the beach, close to the sea. It's greener, it's quieter than the city center. So that is significant benefits of it. It's an area with both local and international demand, expat demand, which makes that prices go up a bit, or are a bit higher because there is more demand on the market. It's long term, should be a very good investment there. But again, we also see there properties that are priced at levels that we believe are significantly overpriced, because sellers try everything, or agents try everything, or they overpromise to the owners, and they say, no, we can sell this for 650, and everything. No, this is crazy. This is even not worth discussing. So you got to be careful that you get good value for money, and make sure that the property, if it's in a house or an apartment, is technically in good conditions. There is parts in Alea that have been built in the, I think, 80s or so. So some of these properties are very good, but some of them have also been built with cheaper materials, or aluminosis is one of these typical examples that can have a major structural impact. It's a defect, big problem for properties. So needs to be checked carefully. in that part. So for instance, if you're looking at a if you're looking at a property in LA, if you've seen a property already, let us know. You share the information about the property, we talk about it, and then if we believe this is interesting, we go and see it with you. That's the first step to be able to value it and to run an appraisal and to give you our opinion on pros and cons. And if we think it's comparably, it's good enough to proceed with it, or if you say no, you can find something better on the market. It's a question of time and a focused, realistic search. So feel free to reach out, and maybe we discuss it together. But reach out, as Dominica said, before you sign a reservation or before you commit on a price with the sellers. Another question here: are areas like Clot, San Andreu, and Sants good areas to buy a property? In other words, areas not in the center of Barcelona. They are what I would call tier 2 areas, although Clot is becoming closer to tier 1 because the tier 1 is expanding in Barcelona. Yes, they are very attractive areas for different reasons. But you can't. I think they are different. Huh? You can't compare San Andreu with Sants, for instance, or with Clot. So they're different in terms of property market, in terms of people who live there, so social mix, in terms of property prices, in terms of rental potential, in terms of tenants you get, etc. So is the question to live there, or is it as an investment? Because if it's to live there, then you talk about three very different parts of the city. Property prices have dropped there. There's a lot of investor demand for these three areas. The investor profile is different now. For instance, you have a more risk-averse investor in Sants and Clot than you would have in San Andreu. For San Andreu, you need to be a little bit more open to taking some risks. You buy with more, you see the potential in the future. You know, you buy a cheaper property. You know the market can improve there, probably a bit more over time. These are good areas to rent it out as well. It's an area where the purchase price has dropped less than the rental price over the last year because of COVID. That's an interesting comparison. That means when you would ever rent it out or when you buy as an investment, you get an additional benefit from that. Okay, you say so it's to live. Yeah. So I think first thing, if you think about these areas, the workshop we would have is with a map of Barcelona on the table. We got big maps on a big table in the office. We talk about the areas, pros and cons. We talk about some sample properties. We would ask you to look for some properties on screen. We would look at some properties and show you, challenge your thinking, and then discuss the pros and cons of the area. Because they are diverse and it depends on your preferences a lot. Equally, the budget might depends on the budget. You might, so for instance, is Clot good? I don't know. Clot has some very nice parts, like close to the market of Clot, for instance. It's a very desirable area. We see a lot of expats buying there. You're close to the Arroba 22. You are 20 minutes walk from the sea. But there's also parts that are not that nice and where maybe I would not recommend you living, or maybe where you don't want to live. And the same happens in San Andreu, the same happens in Sants, of course. Again, here, I can't see your name, but feel free to reach out. We will write in the message here again the contact email address. I can show it here as well. Jeff, can we remove this poll from the screen? So here it is. I think you should see my screen now. So if you've seen a property or if you're searching and you want our opinion, or you're thinking about buying, write us an email, free conversation, 20-30 minutes, you get my view, and then we take it from there. If you just want to stay informed, follow the real estate series, follow the register on our blog, you get more updates coming. That's all tips that are relevant, insights for recommendations for buyers. Oh yeah, here Jeff posted the email. More questions? Anyone more questions? I think a lot of people have dropped in the meanwhile. Yeah, I see one more. Is it interesting to invest in the lower segment apartments around 60K in Valencia? Do you also offer your service there in the lower segments? Is it interesting? Depends on your goal as an investor and depends on your risk profile as an investor. Okay, it's clear that a 60K apartment is not the same as a 300K apartment in Rusafa in Valencia, right? So it means you will have probably a very average apartment in an average building, an average street, but maybe with good future potential. Maybe it's closer to the seaside in that part of the city. If it's in between the city center and the seaside, there's like a kilometer or so more, which is not very attractive area for investments. But I mean, yes, such properties have a low risk from the point of view you don't put much capital into the investment. They can, if they increase their value a bit, it's quickly a high percentage improvement. You get a certain type of tenant that you need to feel comfortable with. Okay, we have buyers who say, I need to like my tenant. I'm not sure if you will like your tenant that you will have in this type of property. Depends, it might need an upgrade as well. But also you need to make sure that the properties are good, that are technically good, because there's a lot of very bad properties in Valencia, structurally bad, very old, but also even if you put a lot of money into them, they would still have structural problems with the walls or the floors or humidity or just things that you can't easily change. So got to be careful with such an investment. But yes, we support buyers with such type of investment. And yes, we support the service in Valencia. We got lawyers, architects there, so we can very easily support that process. By the way, I didn't mention this because we talked a lot about Barcelona, because we offer our service across the hub is Barcelona for us. There's a lot of buyers there. But on the coast, basically from the north of Spain, so on Costa Brava, all the way down to the very south, Costa del Sol, we offer our services. And we give you that protection as a buyer. We even do it more inland, in not everywhere in Spain, because that would be unmanageable, and we don't want to do that. But we also, when I say coast, we see people, a lot of buyers say, like we do in our purchasing close to Murcia, and they say we want to be like half an hour inland, and so that's very easy for us to manage. Then you find fincas, large houses, which have a lot of other complexity, more complexity. See another question. Can you elaborate on the relationship between the drop in rental value versus property value and what this means? You mentioned with regards to clot. So when COVID caused a decrease in purchase prices, buying prices, and in rental prices, because if you, let's take again Barcelona as an example, because that's what you talk about as well. If you look at Barcelona, what demand has disappeared temporarily? Expats, right? Large companies, European companies, are not sending employees at the moment to Barcelona because of COVID. Everybody works from home. So those people who come typically for 6, 9 months, a year, don't rent properties. People who travel don't come. There's no Airbnb people anymore. People who do sabbaticals, people who just come here and work or study here. A lot of that demand has gone, meaning that properties become empty. Rental properties become empty. Therefore, more supply than demand on the market. Therefore, property prices drop. You see larger drops in the center of Barcelona because there's a big component of international demand that disappeared. The majority of it disappeared temporarily. You see that drop in demand less in areas like Clot, and certainly in the areas like San Andreu. This is more true for San Andreu than for Clot, because there you have a stronger local demand, a lot of working class people who rent properties, and they probably won't buy a property in the next years. So you have there the prices drop because there's still less buyers because of COVID, but there is still a strong or a stronger rental demand, then, and that's why I said that that relationship is different depending on the location. Again, so if you look as an investor at it, you would say it makes more sense to invest in such areas where the purchase price drop more than the rental price. But of course, then that needs to fit your investment strategy, your profile, your risk profile, etc. Okay, but not everybody wants to invest in San Andreo, for instance. Some people like to invest in more central locations. Okay. Are there more questions? Otherwise, we are 25 minutes over time already, but I'm happy to answer more questions if there are more questions. But again, I understand. So for a lot of people, questions are specific to certain projects or plans they have. So drop us an email, reach out, and we can discuss your plans one by one. It's a call with me directly. I take these initial calls myself. And again, feel free to watch the other webinars. There's also very good articles on Metropolitan on the websites with tips for buyers, tips on the property market, what I think is going to happen this year on the property market. Actually, I read back I wrote an article in, I think about a year ago, April, Victor, last year, right after the start of COVID, with my view on what I thought was going to happen with the property markets. And a lot of people said, well, this is risky what you're doing here because you're making some fairly clear predictions. And I thought, well, I think I feel comfortable making these predictions and saying what I said. And I read it again, and it's still very, very relevant, the one-year-old article. And a lot of the things that I wrote that I thought would happen materialized in the markets. So that, in combination with the 2020 article, I think gives you a very good insight on the market, on the timing to buy, on the prices, etc.
And I completely agree, Raf. And I was going to suggest you take some risks again and you share the views for 2021 and 2022. But there aren't any other questions. I just wanted to say thank you very much for answering all of them, and to everybody who joined us. And to remember to continue following and be inspired. Follow Inspire Property Experts and Apartments. And don't be shy. Ask us lots of questions, and follow Barcelona Metropolitan. You'll see a link to the Inspire webinars right on our homepage, as well as in the different, you can follow them on their corporate profile to see any updates. Without any further ado, Raf, I think we can let the people go. And thank you again for all your time and attention and your expertise. So you
and if you're welcome. Thanks for everyone for joining. And if you like the webinar, also feel free to, on Metropolitan sites, to write a short comment about it. I think that's good, interesting for the international community, and for people from Metropolitan who help us organize this. Thanks everyone, and have a good evening.
Alrighty, take care.
Bye-bye.